Dear listeners, close your eyes for a moment. Imagine a boy drenched in rain, trembling not just from the cold but from the voices of hatred around him. Villagers shout, accuse, and drive him out like a disease. Thunder roars in the sky as if nature itself weeps, while this orphan boy, innocent yet unwanted, is cast into the darkness of the forest. And little does he know, beyond the trees that whisper, something ancient and terrifying is waiting. But before we begin the story, don't forget to support this channel by liking, sharing, commenting, and subscribing. Your support means so much and keeps us motivated to bring more exciting stories to life. Oh, and don't forget to check in down in the comments. Let us know where you're listening from so we can see just how far our stories have traveled. Now let's dive into the story. The night was darker than most, as if the sky had shut its eyes, unwilling to witness the cruelty unfolding below. Raka stood in the middle of the village square, soaked to the bone. Angry villagers circled around him, holding torches in their hands, hatred in their eyes. He was only 13, skinny, worn, and alone. This boy is cursed. Ever since he came, our crops have failed, screamed one woman. And now lightning has struck the chief's house. That's no coincidence, barked another. His parents died in a fire, remember? That should have been our warning. The village chief, an old man with a shaking hand, pointed his staff directly at Raka. For the safety of us all, this boy must leave. Tonight. Raka didn't cry. He didn't shout or beg. He simply looked around, his eyes hollow, as if the last piece of hope had already left him. He held tight to the only thing he had, a cloth bag, old and torn, the last gift from his mother before she died. Without a word, he turned away and walked into the rain, his feet sinking into the mud with every step, toward the edge of the forest, toward the place no one dared go, not even to say goodbye. The forest loomed like a black mouth, open wide and waiting to swallow him whole. But Raka had no choice. Branches scratched his skin. Cold wind tore through his clothes. His stomach growled, his hands shook, and his vision blurred. He didn't know how far he had walked. Didn't know if he was awake or trapped in some kind of nightmare. Until finally, his body collapsed beneath a large tree, and everything went silent. Sound. Heavy footsteps. Raka opened his eyes. Rain had stopped, but the ground was still wet and cold. And there, standing before him, was a boar. Well, not just any boar. A massive wild boar, dark as the night itself. Its eyes glowing softly through the fog. But those eyes didn't burn with hunger or rage. They were calm, ancient, almost human. Raka froze. Too weak to run, too tired to scream. And then he heard something, not out loud but inside his mind. Your name is Raka. The boy swallowed hard. Who are you? I am a guardian. This forest knows you. It calls you. The boar walked in slow circles around Raka, then settled down beside him, not as a predator, but as a protector. For the first time since he had been cast out, Raka did not feel afraid. Morning came, and so did the journey. The boar, whom Raka later named Tandala, began to guide him, without force, without words, just presence and purpose. Tandala showed him hidden rivers, routes that could be eaten, paths to avoid, and dangers that watched from the shadows. But the forest wasn't silent at night. Whispers rose with the mist. Strange, distant sounds that stirred something deep in Raka's bones. He couldn't tell if they were animal cries or something older. One night, As they sat near a small stream, Raka asked, "Why are you helping me?" Tandala answered, not with a voice, but with a thought that filled Raka's mind like wind through leaves. "Because you are honest, even when the world has turned against you. Because your heart remained clean, even when pain tried to stain it." And from that night on, Raka no longer feared sleep. But in his dreams, he began to see a gate. An enormous gate, made of living roots, rising from the center of the forest. It waited for him, and behind it something ancient was calling. The days passed slowly, but not without meaning. Raka followed Tandala deeper into the forest, moving through places that seemed untouched by time. Trees older than memory stood like silent watchers, their trunks covered in moss that glowed faintly under the moonlight. Strange birds flew overhead, their calls unfamiliar, haunting. Flowers opened only at night, releasing scents that made Raka dizzy with wonder. But behind that wonder there was always a feeling, as if the forest was not just watching but waiting. Every now and then, Tandala would stop suddenly, sniff the air, and steer Raka away from certain paths. Once, as they crossed a shallow stream, Raka spotted the bones of a deer caught in thorny vines. The bones were fresh, the meat barely rotting, and yet no animal had touched the remains. Tandala said nothing, but his silence spoke louder than fear. Raka was growing stronger. Each day he walked farther, learned more. He could now tell which roots were edible and which would burn the tongue. He knew which mushrooms brought dreams and which brought death. But still his nights were restless. The dreams came again and again. The gate of roots, the glowing orb, the soft voice calling his name. Each time he woke, the sound of the forest grew quieter, as if holding its breath. On the seventh day, Tandala led him to a cliff where the trees parted and the valley below could be seen. From here, Raka saw the world differently. The winding river like a silver snake, the mountains guarding the horizon, and somewhere beyond, the village that had forgotten him. He sat at the edge and whispered, "Do they ever think about me?" Tandala stood behind him, his large form casting a long shadow. "No, but the forest does." Raka did not cry. He had no more tears left. But in his heart something hardened. Not hatred, not anger, just distance. As they climbed down from the cliff, Tandala turned sharply into a path Raka had never seen before. The trees here were taller, their roots lifting from the ground like the backs of sleeping beasts. The air grew colder. Even the wind seemed unsure, moving in short bursts before fading into silence. They reached a hill covered in thick vines. Tandala stood before it, unmoving. Raka touched the vines. They felt warm. And then, as if hearing an invisible signal, the vines began to retreat, curling back like fingers loosening their grip. Before them stood the gate from Raka's dreams. It was real, massive, alive, made entirely of twisting roots and vines, glowing softly from within. A strange pulse moved through it like a heartbeat. Raka stepped back, overwhelmed by the energy coming from it. "What is this?" he asked. "The beginning," Tandala said. "And the place where all truth is buried." They didn't enter. Not yet. Tandala turned and walked away, and Raka followed. That night, as they camped near a small spring, Tandala finally spoke more than a few words. Long ago, this forest was not silent. There were many who spoke to it, protected it, lived with it, until one of them betrayed it. Raka leaned forward, eyes locked on Tandala. "Who?" There was a long pause. "Me." Raka froze. He tried to speak, but no words came out. Tandala continued, his thoughts slower now, heavy. I was once like you. Human. Trusted. Chosen. But I was tempted. I brought outsiders through the gate. They tried to take the power hidden within. The forest fought back. And I was cursed. RAKA'S voice finally returned. Why me? Why now? Because you are honest. And only the truly honest can pass through the gate without destroying what lies beyond it. RAKA looked into Tandala's eyes and saw, for the first time, the sadness behind the beast. The weight of centuries. A shame. But before he could ask more, the wind shifted. All sound in the forest vanished. Not a single insect. Not a leaf stirred. It was as if the world had gone silent in fear. Tandala stood up, alert. We're being watched. From between the trees, shadows moved. Not animals. Not men. Figures without form, darker than night, with eyes that burned red like coals. RAKA'S body tensed. Stay behind me, Tandala said. The figures did not attack. They circled slowly, whispering. Voices that sounded like dry leaves scraping across stone. One of them stepped forward. It took the shape of a man, but its face was hollow. It spoke. The cursed one returns. And he brings the key. RAKA felt something cold inside his chest. The figure was not talking about Tandala. It was talking about him. Go back, child, it hissed. Or you will open what should remain buried. Tandala growled, and the shadows recoiled. You have no power here. He is under the forest's protection. But the figure smiled, a cruel cracking sound. The forest is old. Forgets. But we do not. Then, without warning, the shadows disappeared, as if sucked into the trees. RAKA fell to his knees, his breath coming in short gasps. Tandala helped him up. Now you see. The deeper we go, the more dangerous it becomes. They were once men. Now they are nothing but curses, bound by greed and betrayal. RAKA didn't answer. He stared at the trees, now silent again, hiding their secrets. They traveled for 2 more days without speaking much. The air grew heavier. The birds no longer sang. Even the trees leaned in closer, as if trying to listen. Then they came upon a strange sight. A clearing filled with stones, each carved with names. RAKA walked among them, reading slowly. One name stopped him cold. Rakiana. His father's name. He turned to Tandala wide-eyed. My father was here. Tandala lowered his head. Yes. He stood at the edge of the gate. But he turned away. RAKA'S heart thudded in his chest. Why? Because he feared what he would become. The forest offered him the truth. But he chose to forget. RAKA touched the stone. It was warm like the vines. And for a moment, he felt his father's hand on his shoulder. Not real. But not imagined. He stood in silence for a long time, until the sun disappeared behind the trees. That night he had a different dream. Not of the gate, but of fire. A village burning. Voices screaming. And a figure in the flames, holding a torch. The face turned toward him, and it was the village elder. RAKA woke up with a scream. Tandala was already standing, eyes glowing in the darkness. They're coming. The forest was no longer quiet. At dawn, the sounds of distant shouting reached RAKA'S ears. Not the cries of animals, but human voices, cutting through the thick air like knives. RAKA and Tandala crouched low beneath the twisted roots of a fallen tree, listening. The voices were coming closer, and they were many. Tandala's breathing was calm, but his body remained tense, muscles ready to spring. They are searching. They crossed the outer ring of the forest. That should not be possible. RAKA'S heart pounded. You said no one could enter this deep. You said the forest protects itself. Tandala looked at him. It does. But something or someone is guiding them. They move with knowledge they should not have. Raka thought of the shadows, the ones with burning red eyes. Could they be leading the villagers? But why? What did the elders want with him now, after throwing him away like a stray dog? As the voices passed further away, Raka and Tandala moved. Quietly, carefully. Every step taken with purpose. Every sound measured. The forest was thick with tension, as if it too was holding its breath. They moved toward higher ground, through dense ferns and under arching branches, until they reached a rocky ridge. From there, Raka saw it with his own eyes. A group of at least 20 villagers, armed with spears, machetes, and torches. At their center was the village elder himself, wrapped in layers of dark cloth, holding the same crooked staff he had raised against Raka nights ago. And next to him walked two strangers, not from the village. They wore long robes of gray, their faces hidden by veils, their movements smooth and silent. They did not carry weapons, but even from a distance, Raka could feel something cold and wrong about them. "Who are they?" he whispered. Tandala narrowed his eyes. "They are called the Hollow, keepers of forbidden knowledge. They offer truth. At a cost. Why are they helping the village? Because the village no longer seeks justice, seeks power. And the Hollow trade in power. Dark, twisted power buried in secrets the forest itself tried to forget." Raka shivered. The forest, once a place of wonder, now felt like a battlefield. He wanted to run. He wanted to hide. But something deep in his chest told him to stand. So he asked, "What do they want from me?" Tandala turned to him with a gaze heavy and full of sorrow. "They want what you carry inside. You're not just a boy, Raka. You're key. The forest chose you long before you were born." Raka looked down at his hands. They were small, dirty, shaking. "I'm just a child." "No. You are the answer to a question asked centuries ago. That is why the gate calls to you. That is why the Hollow fear you. And why they want to reach the gate before you do." They traveled through lesser-known trails, deeper into the forest's forgotten corners. Strange symbols began to appear on the trees, etched long ago, glowing faintly at dusk. Tandala explained they were remnants of the old guardians, signs of warnings, maps, and songs written in the language of the forest. But some of those symbols were broken, cracked, corrupted. And the deeper they went, the more Raka felt the weight of eyes watching from the shadows. Not animals, not spirits, but things that remembered pain. Things that waited for someone to make a mistake. That night Raka couldn't sleep. He sat beside a pool of still water, watching the reflection of stars ripple across its surface. He saw his face. Then another beside it. He turned. No one was there. But the reflection remained. Boy. About his age. Same clothes. Same face. But the eyes were pitch black, and the smile it wore was not his own. "Who are you?" Raka whispered. The reflection blinked slowly. Then it spoke in his own voice. "The one you could become. If you choose the wrong path." The water shattered with Tandala's snout as he stepped in protectively. "Do not speak to mirrors in this part of the forest," Tandala growled. "They remember truths not meant to be spoken." By the next morning, they had no choice but to cross into the sunken grove, a part of the forest where the trees leaned so far in that sunlight barely touched the ground. Mushrooms the size of plates grew in clumps. The air was thick with moisture. Every step echoed. They were close to the gate now. Raka could feel it like a pull in his chest. But with every step, the feeling of danger grew stronger. Suddenly Tandala stopped. Ahead of them stood a tree split clean down the middle. From its center a voice came, soft, feminine and trembling. "Help me, please." Raka took a step forward, but Tandala blocked him with his body. "No. That is not real. But, it sounds like your mother. Because the forest remembers your pain. And pain is the easiest door to open." Raka turned pale. "But why would the forest do that? It is not the forest. It is what lies beneath it." The voice called again, sobbing now, desperate. "Raka. Come back to me." Raka pressed his fists to his ears and walked forward with Tandala shielding him. Behind them, the tree cracked, and from its center a figure began to pull itself out. A twisted imitation of a woman, her face familiar but wrong, her eyes empty sockets, her smile stretched too wide. They did not look back. By midday, they reached the ridge of silence, the final threshold before the gate. The ground was covered in bones, animals and perhaps more. The trees here bore no leaves. Only vines, coiling downward like fingers reaching for something just beyond their grasp. And there, in the distance, the gate. No longer a dream. No longer hidden. But they were not alone. The villagers had arrived. And this time, they had already begun the ritual. The hollow stood before the gate, their veils lifted to reveal faces made of nothing but carved wood and ash. They chanted in a language that cracked the air. The village elder held a bowl of black liquid, pouring it onto the ground. The roots writhed. The gate trembled. Tandala growled. "They are forcing the gate open. If they succeed, the forest will not survive. And neither will we." Raka stepped forward. His knees trembled. His breath shook. But his voice was steady. "We have to stop them." Tandala looked at him, not as a guardian to a child, but as an equal. "Then we walk into danger together. One last time." The roots pulsed with unnatural life, twisting and curling like wounded serpents around the glowing gate. The air was heavier now, thick with smoke, sweat, and old fear that seemed to rise from the very soil. The chants from the hollow grew louder, faster, more frantic. Each word they spoke sent a shudder through the trees. Bark cracked open. Branches bled sap that dripped like tears. The forest was in pain. Raka stood frozen, hidden behind a curtain of vines, watching it all unfold. Tandala beside him, unmoving, silent. But the silence was not calm. It was the silence of something ancient remembering its own destruction. The village elder, his face streaked with ash and his hands trembling with a mixture of power and madness, stepped closer to the gate. In his hands was the final offering, a bone knife carved from something that should have stayed buried. He raised it high above the bowl of black liquid, his eyes wild. "This forest will bend," he cried. "It will answer to us. The curse ends tonight." Raka's chest tightened. That voice, that tone. It wasn't power he heard in the elder's voice. It was desperation. And behind it, something darker. Something that didn't belong to him at all. The hollow had brought more than knowledge. They had brought infection. Their presence was like mold, like rot. And it was spreading. "Tandala," Raka whispered. "We have to do something." Tandala's eyes narrowed. "You are the only one the gate listens to. But if you go now they will see you. And they will try to take you." "They already have everything else," Raka answered. He stepped out from behind the vines, the glow of the gate painting his face in pale green light. First no one saw him. Then the chanting faltered. One by one heads turned. The villagers gasped. Some stepped back unsure. But the elder, The elder stared at him as if he had seen a ghost rise from his past. "You," the elder whispered. "I never left," Raka said softly. "You threw me out, but I never disappeared. I found something stronger than fear. Stronger than your lies." The hollow moved, slow and smooth, surrounding the gate. Their heads tilted toward Raka, and they spoke in one voice that did not belong to men. "The gate is opening. Cannot be stopped. The blood of the forest will feed the roots. And the heart will awaken." Raka didn't understand all of it, but his body reacted before his mind did. He ran. Through the gasping crowd, through the flickering torches. He ran straight for the gate. Tandala crashed through the vines behind him, roaring like thunder. The elder screamed, "Stop him!" Villagers lunged. Raka ducked under a swinging spear. A torch flew past his head. Someone grabbed his arm, he kicked and broke free. Then the ground cracked beneath his feet. The gate had awakened. Its roots lifted and shifted like a breathing thing. A light poured from its center, and a hum, deep, vibrating, filled the air. Everyone fell to their knees, screaming as the hum entered their bones. Only Raka remained standing. He stepped to the gate. The hollow reached out toward him, but Tandala rammed into them, tossing two of them into the trees. One hissed, its wooden face cracking open to reveal a black void underneath. Raka placed his hand on the gate. The roots stopped moving. The hum stopped. Everything became still. And then, from deep within the gate, a voice. "You are not ready." Raka's knees buckled. He gasped, struggling to breathe. "Please," he whispered. "Tell me what to do. How to stop this. The forest remembers you, but its heart is not easily healed. Step forward. If you are willing to carry its burden." Without knowing why, Raka stepped through the gate. The moment he did, the world changed. It was not like stepping into another place. It was like stepping into a memory. He was standing in a forest, but not the one he knew. This one was brighter, alive with color. Voices sang from the treetops. Light danced between the leaves. Children laughed in the distance. And there, under a great tree, stood his father. Prakyana. Young, strong, smiling. "Father." His father turned, surprised but calm. "You came." Raka ran to him. But just before he reached him, the forest shifted. The colors bled. The leaves withered. The sky darkened. Fire spread from the roots upward. Screams. The laughter twisted into cries. And his father burned. Again. Raka fell to the ground, sobbing. A voice came again. "This is the truth. All those who stood before the gate were shown what they loved most, and what they feared most. This is the trial." Raka stood slowly. "I've already lost everything. What more can you take from me? Your soul. If you allow it to be twisted by vengeance." Then the memory cracked like glass, and Raka was back at the gate, but now standing inside its core. A hollow chamber of roots and glowing veins, pulsing like veins in a living creature. The hollow were still outside, clawing at the edge of the gate, screaming in voices that did not belong to them. The villagers were running, some deeper into the forest, others collapsing where they stood. Tandala limped toward the entrance, wounded but still alive. His body was torn, blood dripping, but his eyes were locked on Raka. "You must choose now," the voice said. "Seal the gate forever, and the forest will sleep. But the hollow will remain. Or awaken the heart, and the forest will rise. But its judgment will fall on everyone who stands untrue." Raka's hands trembled. "I don't want anyone else to suffer," he whispered. "Then be the voice of the forest. Let it see you. Let it decide." Raka stepped forward and placed his palm on the core. Images rushed into his mind. The pain of the animals hunted for greed. The sorrow of trees cut down with no thanks. The memories of children once raised with love beside the forest, before fear poisoned their minds. And finally, the eyes of his mother, holding him as a baby, singing to the trees. He closed his eyes. "I'm ready." Outside the gate, the hollow stopped chanting. The villagers froze. And then a roar. Not from Tandala. Not from any beast. But from the forest itself. The trees moved. The ground lifted. Roots burst from beneath the soil, twisting upward like towers. The gate exploded in light, and from its center stepped Raka. But he was not alone. Behind him a wall of spirits, the old guardians, the protectors long thought gone, rose from the trees. Raka's eyes glowed with green fire, and when he spoke, his voice was not just his own. "You wanted power," he said to the elder, "but you forgot what it costs." The elder screamed. "He's cursed. He was always cursed." "No," Raka said, stepping forward. "I was chosen." Silence fell. Not the peaceful kind, but a silence so deep, it felt like the forest itself had forgotten how to breathe. The villagers stood motionless, many with dirt-streaked faces frozen in fear, their weapons now heavy in their hands. The hollow no longer moved. They stared through their cracked wooden masks, their bodies twitching like marionettes whose strings had been pulled too tightly. And in the middle of it all stood Raka, not glowing, not floating, not casting magic from his hands, but simply standing tall, chest rising and falling, eyes calm. Yet in his presence, everything around him changed. Tandala dragged himself forward, his side torn open by one of the hollow's earlier strikes. His heavy breaths rumbled from deep in his chest, but he did not fall. His eyes, full of pain, found Raka's. "You did it," he whispered in Raka's mind. "You passed the trial. The forest knows your heart." But even as Tandala said it, the roots beneath their feet began to twitch. A deep, low groan rumbled beneath the earth. Raka turned slowly, his gaze returning to the gate, now split wide open behind him. The heart of the forest pulsed visibly at its center. A glowing orb of tangled life, beating like the heart of a creature still waking from centuries of sleep. From that pulsing center, something began to emerge. Not a creature, not a ghost, not a human. It was the forest itself, shaped in human form. Tall, impossible, made of bark and vine and mist and memory. Its face had no mouth, only eyes that shimmered like emeralds and bled with sadness. It stepped out of the gate and stood beside Raka, towering over all. The hollow recoiled immediately. One of them hissed and burst into black smoke. Another fell to its knees, whispering nonsense. The last tried to flee, but roots snatched its legs and dragged it screaming into the earth. The villagers cried out, some begging for mercy, others trying to run, only to be stopped by branches slithering up their legs. Then the forest spoke. Its voice was not one, but thousands layered together. Men, women, children, animals, wind, water, earth, all speaking as one. The words echoed through every leaf, every stone, every bone. You poisoned the soil. You burned what you feared. You betrayed your own. The village elder tried to speak, raising his hand in a gesture of defense. But his mouth refused to open. He fell to his knees, his body shaking violently. Raka looked at them all, the people who had once thrown stones at him, called him cursed, and cast him into darkness without a second thought. He felt nothing. But then he looked at the forest, at the glowing heart, and at Tandala, wounded, trembling but loyal. And in that moment he realized something terrible. The forest's judgment was absolute. "Wait," Raka said. "Please." The forest turned to him. "I know they did wrong," he said softly. "They hurt me. They hurt you. But not all of them knew what they were part of. Many were just afraid." The forest said nothing, but the vines loosened slightly. Tandala stepped forward. "What will you choose, Raka?" Raka looked around, at the crying villagers, the broken forest, the pulsing heart, and the gate still wide behind him. "I want the pain to stop," he whispered. "But I don't want to become like them." He stepped toward the heart of the forest. The closer he came, the brighter it pulsed. "I give myself," he said. "Not as a weapon. Not as a ruler. But as a bridge." The forest figure tilted its head, studying him with unreadable eyes. Raka placed his hand on the heart. Immediately, light surged into him. His body was lifted from the ground. His skin glowed, eyes wide with the force of the memory rushing through him. He saw everything. The first seed planted in sacred soil. The children raised in harmony with the trees. The betrayal. The burning. The curse placed upon Tandala. The fear passed from one generation to the next. The birth of the hollow, born not of evil, but of truth twisted into hunger. He saw himself, born beneath a tree that had once sung, marked before he could walk, protected not by luck, but by love. Then silence. Raka collapsed, panting, coughing, his eyes wide, wet with tears. He turned to the villagers. "You may leave," he said, "but not unchanged. You will carry this forest in your dreams, in your shadows. You will feel its breath every time you cut a tree, every time you lie out of fear. And if you return to this place in hatred, it will remember." The vines let go. One by one the villagers fled, not running, walking, heads bowed, some sobbing, some silent, but none dared look back. Only the village elder remained, still kneeling. He looked up at Raka, his mouth finally open, his voice broken and dry. "Why did you spare me?" Raka answered without anger. "Because someone once spared Tandala. And that choice changed everything." The elder lowered his head and wept. As the sun began to rise, the gate closed behind Raka. The vines wound tightly again, sealing the heart inside. The forest settled into a new stillness. Not fear, not mourning, but the hush of something beginning again. Tandala limped beside Raka. "What happens now?" he asked. "I don't know," Raka replied. "But I think the forest does." Together they returned deeper into the woods, where no path had been carved, where no voice dared to command. Raka was no longer a boy without a home. He was the memory the forest had chosen to keep alive. And from that moment on, whenever the wind passed through the trees, those who listened closely would hear a soft voice, not angry, not sad, but steady. The voice of a child who had once been cursed, and who chose instead to forgive. The sky above the canopy glowed softly in the days that followed, not bright, but no longer choked with mist or rage. Sunlight began to slip between the branches again. The forest, once groaning under the weight of grief and betrayal, now exhaled slowly, carefully, as if testing the idea of peace for the very first time in centuries. Raka walked beside Tandala, moving quietly along paths that no longer twisted to confuse him. The forest seemed to trust him now, the way it once trusted those long forgotten. Flowers bloomed in his footsteps. Trees bent just slightly as he passed, like old friends acknowledging his presence. The whispers had changed too. No longer warnings or accusations, but lullabies. They didn't speak in words, not anymore, but in feelings. Memory. He was no longer the boy who had stumbled in from the rain, broken by exile. He had become something else. Still human, yes, but more than that. The forest had shown him what lay at its heart, and now that knowing lived in him. It shaped how he breathed, how he moved, how he listened. But knowing truth came with weight. On the third day after the gate closed, Raka and Tandala reached a wide clearing where the ground was warm and the roots of the trees formed circles around a sunken pit. Tandala slowed. "Here," he said, his thoughts rough with pain. "This is where the heart once first awakened, long before it was hidden behind the gate." The soil was soft, almost like flesh. The pit in the center looked empty at first glance, but as Raka stepped closer, he felt it. A presence beneath the ground. Resting. Watching. "What is it?" he asked. "The memory of the first betrayal." Raka knelt, placing his hand on the moss-covered ground. His fingers twitched as warmth rose up his arm. Visions passed behind his eyes, of joy turning to greed, of trust becoming fear, of harmony shattered by a single lie. He pulled his hand back and sat in silence. Tandala lay down beside him, his massive body easing into the earth with a deep, slow exhale. "You will need to decide," Tandala said, "what kind of guardian you want to become. This forest has known many. Some who protected, others who punished." "I don't want to be feared," Raka replied quietly. "Then you must become someone worth listening to." As days turned into weeks, Raka stayed. He learned more from the forest than he ever had from people. He listened to how the birds warned each other of snakes. He watched the way mushrooms bloomed only after a storm. He followed ants to hidden water sources and memorized the path of the wind. But the peace did not last untouched. One night, just after the rains had passed, Tandala returned from a hunt with a limp worse than usual. Blood stained the fur near his hind leg. He collapsed under the hanging roots of an old fig tree. Raka rushed to him. "What happened?" he whispered, already pulling herbs from his pouch. Tandala winced. "Not beast. Not branch. Man." Raka's hands froze. "Someone's here. From the village." "No." The word hung heavy in the air. "Outsiders." Raka's breath caught. "You're sure?" Tandala nodded. His eyes, once clouded with ancient regret, now burned with a fresh kind of worry. 3 of them, dressed like the Hollow, but not them. Faster, angrier. One carried something made of fire. Raka had never heard that tone in Tandala's thoughts. Not even during the chaos at the gate. "Did they see you?" "Yes, but they did not chase. They were too busy, searching. For me." Tandala didn't answer. He didn't have to. That night, Raka couldn't sleep. He sat beside the glowing vines that marked the edge of the old guardian's resting place, staring into the distance. His hands shook, not with fear, but with knowing. The forest's secret had not died. It had traveled, carried by someone. Whispers, stories, symbols passed through generations, until someone far beyond the village caught hold of it. And now, they were coming. Raka looked at the wound on Tandala's leg. The blood had darkened. The breath had grown shallow. "I need to protect this place," he said aloud. But he wasn't sure how. The forest rustled gently in reply. A single leaf drifted down from above and landed on his shoulder. Then another. Then a dozen more. Raka looked up. The branches had opened. Sign. He stood and followed the path revealed by the shifting leaves, a narrow trail leading west, past the places Tandala had once forbidden him to go. He didn't ask for permission. He just went. The western grove was colder. The trees were taller. their trunks twisted in spirals. The ground was marked by strange carvings, symbols older than the gate. Symbols even Tandala had never spoken of. And in the center of it all stood a tree unlike any Raka had seen. White bark. No leaves. Bark that shimmered in the moonlight like bone. He stepped closer. Something called to him from within. Not with malice. Not with anger. But with need. He reached out, and the bark shifted, opening like a curtain. Inside was a hollow chamber, pulsing softly. A voice greeted him. Gentle. Feminine. You have come far, child of the forest. Raka said nothing. He listened. The wound is open again. And the forest cannot heal if it must fight. You must prepare. Not for revenge, but for endurance. Raka took a breath. What must I do? The voice replied, its tone wrapped in sorrow. The gate is not the only passage. There are others. Veins of memory. Pathways of energy. You must learn them. Bind them. Close what must remain closed. And if they try to force them open, then the forest will speak through you. Raka stepped into the heart of the white tree. Closed behind him. Time bent inside the tree. Days passed outside, but for Raka it was only moments. Or maybe longer. He was taught without words. Shown how to feel the hum beneath the ground. How to listen for changes in the breath of the wind. How to guide growth with thought. How to awaken roots that could protect, and put to sleep those that hungered. When he finally emerged, the moon had changed shape in the sky. Tandala was waiting. He stood slowly when he saw Raka. His eyes widened. Raka was no longer just a boy. Vines grew around his arms like veins. Moss clung gently to his shoulders. His skin shimmered with a quiet glow. His hair, once tangled and rough, now held streaks of silver like moonlight trapped in strands of black. He said only one thing. They're closer. Tandala nodded. Then it begins. But neither of them ran. They stood side by side, not as boy and beast, but as protectors. As echoes of an ancient promise. Preparing to rise again. They came not with torches and chants like the villagers had. They came with silence. With purpose. With tools that hummed low like dying insects and blades that glinted not with metal, but with cold intention. 3 of them at first. And more. Each one wrapped in cloaks that did not shift with the wind, as if they carried no weight at all. Their faces were masked, not out of shame, but to protect the world from what looked out through their eyes. From the edge of the ravine, Raka saw them enter. They did not hesitate. They did not wonder. They knew where they were going. They had been here before. Tandala crouched low beside him, still wounded, though now his steps no longer trembled. The forest had given him time to heal, just enough to stand beside Raka one more time. But not enough to run. Not enough to fight for long. Raka touched the roots beneath them, letting his fingers slip into the soft earth. He whispered not with his mouth but with his thoughts. The forest heard. The branches shifted, ready. Not yet, Raka said aloud. Let them come. At the base of the ridge, the newcomers set up their strange instruments. Long rods they drove into the earth, panels they unfolded that shimmered like water, and boxes that clicked and pulsed like living hearts. They spoke in quiet tones, using words Raka didn't recognize. Some of them bent close to the soil, placing stones into containers, sniffing bark, tasting leaves. But it wasn't curiosity that moved their hands. It was hunger. Tandala growled low. They are looking for the old veins. The veins that feed the heart. Raka nodded slowly. They want to find the other gates. And if they do, then it won't be a village that burns. It will be the whole forest. By nightfall there were 6 of them. They built no fire. Nothing. Slept in turns. Raka watched them from high above. His body pressed to the trunk of a tree whose bark had split open to cradle him. He listened. They called themselves the Dredge. They were not hunters. Not seekers. They were extractors. One of them, taller than the others, spoke into a device that made no sound. A one-way conversation with someone Raka could not see. He only caught fragments. Vane reads strong confirmation of anomaly. Pre-event patterns match. Another voice replied from the device. Distant, harsh. Secure the site. Do not engage locals. Do not disturb the core. But the tall one. He turned then slowly and looked directly toward the tree Raka was in. As if he had known all along. Raka froze. The man did nothing. Said nothing. Only stared for a long moment. And then turned away. Raka slipped down from the tree and landed beside Tandala. His voice was a whisper. They're not lost. They're not guessing. They've mapped this place before. Tandala stared ahead. That means someone told them. Someone who passed through the gate before you. The thought settled heavy in Raka's chest. His father had stood before the gate once. Had he spoken? Had he been followed? Or was it someone else? The next morning the Dredge began to dig. Not with shovels. Not with hands. They used devices that cracked the ground in perfect squares, that peeled back roots without damaging them. Machines that scanned the very memories of the trees. And then one of them found it. A stone buried deep, marked with the same sigil Raka had seen in the old grove. A symbol of the first guardian. The Dredge gathered around it. Their leader knelt, brushing soil away with precise, reverent strokes. Then he smiled. It was the first expression any of them had made. Raka whispered, I have to stop them. Tandala didn't stop him. Then you must show them something they fear more than loss. Raka walked down the slope slowly, alone. His hands raised in peace. The Dredge didn't react at first. Only when he was halfway into the clearing did they move. One turned, hand going to a device at his belt. Another raised what looked like a long rod, pointing it directly at Raka. Then the leader stepped forward. He spoke calmly. You are the anomaly. I'm part of this forest, Raka replied. And you don't belong here. We're not here to harm it, the man said. Only to understand it. Preserve it. Record it. You're cutting into it. Tearing it open. The leader nodded, as if this were merely a difference of philosophy. All ecosystems evolve. We are evolution's hand. Raka stepped closer, the earth responding to each footfall, roots shifting quietly, vines coiling at the edges of sight. Leave, he said. The leader tilted his head. And if we don't? Raka's eyes met his. Then you'll see what the forest remembers. The first warning came in a sudden gust of wind, not from the sky but from below. The ground cracked, roots surged, vines exploded upward, wrapping around 2 of the Dredge's machines and crushing them in seconds. Panic rippled through the camp. The leader raised his hand. Do not retaliate. But it was too late. One of the Dredge fired his rod. The bolt struck a tree behind Raka. The scream that followed wasn't from a creature. It was from the forest itself. The branches trembled. The leaves shook. And from every corner of the woods, the forest awakened. Ghosts of old guardians, not spirits but echoes shaped from bark and breath, emerged from trunks, their forms tall and shifting, their eyes glowing with fire and sorrow. The Dredge froze. Then one of them ran. Mistake. The ground opened beneath him, swallowed whole. The others raised their rods, but the forest was faster. Tandala charged through the trees, his roar breaking the air. He struck two to the ground with a sweep of his horns, vines finishing what he began. Only the leader remained standing. He looked at Raka, his calm broken now, a flicker of something human in his eyes. "You don't know what's coming," he said. "I know enough," Raka replied. "They'll send more. Stronger. They'll burn this place to the roots. Then let them try." Raka raised his hands, and the forest answered. Roots rose, wrapped around the leader, holding him tight. Not to kill, not yet, but to silence. Then Raka spoke. Not to him, but to the forest. "It's time." The ground beneath the stone pulsed. The old vein sealed itself. The forest exhaled, not in rage but in release. All at once the machines died. The lights dimmed. The sounds stopped. Even the birds fell silent. And then, it was over. The dredge were gone. Tandala limped to Raka's side, blood trailing behind him. "You risked everything." "I did what I had to." The forest whispered around them, low and grateful. And Raka knew, this was not the end. But for now, the forest had time. The light changed. Not all at once, and not with a roar. Changed in small patient shifts. Like a breath drawn after years of holding it in. The trees that had stood like sentinels over centuries now seemed to lean just slightly, no longer in tension, but in trust. The ground, once tight and trembling beneath every step, began to soften, warm, yield. Dew returned. So did songbirds. And from the cracks in old bark, new shoots emerged. The forest was healing. But healing is never quiet. Raka sat at the edge of the scar, the place where the dredge had opened the vein. Though the wound had closed, and though the roots had knitted over it like skin over broken bone, the memory still pulsed. Beneath his fingertips he could feel it. Not pain, not anymore, but watchfulness. A memory waiting to see what he would become next. Behind him, Tandala slept in the hollow of a great tree, breath slow and deep. His wounds had worsened after the fight. The strike from the fire rod had done something even the forest couldn't fully undo. His fur had lost its sheen. His movements were slower now, heavier. But his eyes, when open, still burned with the same fierce light. Raka stood. He walked barefoot through the grove, letting his feet find their own path. The forest no longer twisted to mislead him. It had surrendered to his steps, the way a body trusts its heart to keep beating. But his heart was not calm. He thought of the dredge. The way their leader had looked at him in the final moment. Not with hatred, but with warning. They'll send more. Stronger. They'll burn this place to the roots. And Raka knew he wasn't wrong. Somewhere beyond the trees, past the mountains, past the rivers, there were people, many people, who did not hear the forest. Who had never sat with it in silence. Who did not dream in green. They would not stop because one team failed. They would come again. And this time they wouldn't send quiet masks and soft devices. They would send fire. That night the forest called him. Not with words. With dreams. He saw a mountain split in two. A valley turned black. A child holding a seed in her hands, weeping because no soil would accept it. And then the image of Tandala, not old, not wounded, but young again, running through trees that burned behind him, trying to reach something. Someone before the flames took everything. Raka woke with his breath caught in his throat. He turned. Tandala was watching him. "You saw it," the beast said. Raka nodded. "The fire comes." They met at the circle of fallen leaves, the sacred place where the oldest guardians once held council. Now it was only the two of them. Raka sat cross-legged on the moss, Tandala beside him, heavy with the weight of age and time. The moon hung low above them, caught in the branches like a glowing fruit not yet ripe. "I'm not enough," Raka said. "Not for what's coming." "You are more than enough," Tandala replied. "But not alone. That's the problem. I'm alone. I'm the only one left to protect this place." Tandala turned his head slowly, the moonlight glinting in his fading eyes. "You think you are the first?" Raka frowned. "You are not alone. You are only the first to survive." With effort Tandala rose. His legs trembled. His breath hitched. But he walked to the center of the circle and lowered his head. His horns scraped against the soil, his body trembling with effort. "Come," he said. Raka approached. Tandala's voice entered his thoughts, deeper than before, woven with pain and memory. "Take what remains of me. My strength, my fire, my bond. The forest gave me one lifetime. I give it now to you." "No," Raka whispered. "You'll die. I am dying already. And if I fall without giving, then all I suffered was wasted. Let it be more than just memory. Let me become part of the forest again, through you." Raka wept, but he knelt, placed his hand on Tandala's chest, and felt the transfer begin. The wind howled through the trees. The ground glowed with green and gold. Tandala's body lifted from the earth, his fur turning into vines, his bones into roots, his eyes into twin seeds that blinked once more, then closed forever. And Raka, small, fragile, human Raka, screamed. His body convulsed as power surged into him. He felt Tandala's rage, his sorrow, his years of waiting. He saw every moment of his life, from the day he was cursed by the villagers to the long dark decades alone. Every tear, every roar, every scar. And then Raka saw himself, not from the inside, but from Tandala's eyes. He saw a boy who should have died but didn't. He saw a soul worth saving, and that knowing broke something in him, then remade it. When the light faded, Raka stood taller, not older, but ancient. His skin glowed faintly. Vines coiled gently at his wrists, not as decoration, but as memory. His voice, when he spoke, carried Tandala's echo. "I am not alone." That night, the forest crowned him. The stars fell low. The trees bent inward. The old spirits returned, shadows of bark and light, and they circled him in silence. A single white leaf fell into his hands. Symbol, promise. And from that moment forward, the forest knew his name. Not Raka the boy, but Raka the guardian. Weeks passed. The forest changed again. Animals returned to places long abandoned. Seeds once dormant bloomed overnight. Rivers that had run dry trickled softly again. The forest remembered how to be whole. But Raka did not wait. He worked. He planted warning roots at the borders. He sent whispers into the wind, guiding lost children safely out, turning away those who sought with greed. He learned every corner, every breath. And at night when he rested, he dreamed not only his dreams, but Tandala's too. And then, one morning, as the fog lifted over the east, a shadow appeared on the horizon. Not one person, not three, but many, marching, carrying steel, carrying flame. And at their center, a machine taller than trees, groaning with power. Raka stood at the top of the ridge. He placed his hand on the earth, closed his eyes, and smiled. "Let them come," he said softly, because the forest no longer needed to be protected. It had already learned how to protect itself, and he was its voice. The roots held the sky. The heart beat steady. The guardian was ready. Dear listeners, from the story of Raka, the orphan boy who was cast out and later guided by a wild boar into a forest full of secrets, we learn that sometimes the world does not embrace us the way it should. It rejects us, mocks us, even tries to break us. But that doesn't mean our journey is over. In fact, it is often in those darkest places that Allah opens a path we never imagined. Raka did not grow up with luxury. He was not raised with the love of human hands. He was raised by the wilderness, by pain, and by a quiet, invisible love that ran deep. And yet he remained honest. He chose kindness even when the world offered him cruelty. And because of that, the forest chose him. He became the voice of something ancient and good. A voice that had long been silenced. This story teaches us that true strength does not come from weapons, power, or pride. Comes from loyalty. From the courage to forgive. From the sincerity to keep choosing what is right even when doing wrong would be easier. Raka did not only save the forest. He saved himself from hatred. He saved the humanity within him. Dear friends, this story is a work of fiction, crafted as if it were real, created to offer reflection, motivation, and inspiration. Because in this life, anyone can be a Raka. Anyone can be lost, misunderstood, or cast aside. But each of us also carries the power to become a guardian of goodness. In our own way, in our own story. Thank you for listening to this story until the end. If this story touched your heart or gave you something meaningful to reflect on, please show your support by liking, commenting, and subscribing to this channel so you don't miss other emotional and inspiring stories we have prepared for you. Feel free to share in the comments which part of the story inspired you the most. We truly enjoy reading your thoughts. See you again in our next story. Thank you, dear friends.